I love
thing.
that.
I did the thing. I was like pretending it was a symbol, but it's not really a symbol. I swear that's going to be like my new intro. Like we said last week, of it being
It's
the
so
Jujutsu
good.
Kaisen throw on the Gojo shirt, and that's going to be the
Yeah.
dancing intro. We should
Yeah.
do that. Spoilers, hopefully, for our panel at Anime Expo this year. That
Yes,
would be
yes.
sick. That would
That would
be
be
so
so
much fun.
fun.
I think that'd be super fun.
Oh, I
Speaking
love
of,
it.
hi everybody. Welcome to episode 14 of the Foodtaku
Hi.
podcast. My name is Paul, and this is my lovely partner Emily. Welcome in.
Yay.
This
Hello,
is gonna
hello,
be
hello.
it's gonna be an interesting one because we came up with this topic not too long ago about
Mhm.
the struggles of the restaurant industry as
Right.
as someone who works in the restaurant industry, right? And maybe not like as a whole, as how it's so difficult to maybe get a DoorDash order on time, and probably that'll come up, but
Just our
more of,
experiences,
yeah, like
basically.
our experiences of operating in a restaurant environment, whether or not it's because I've worked in mom and pop shops, you've waitressed,
Mm.
it's like I've managed hotels and restaurants, and it's like it's a it's a very different beast.
Yeah.
Even my wife, one of her first jobs was a barista, right? So it's like I think
There's so
people
much.
don't, yeah, people
Yeah.
don't realize how many people have worked in restaurants,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
I
It's so
think,
true.
but I also know that not a lot of people have. So I want to know your opinion here. Do you
Yes.
think so you know how in South Korea, like the men have to be automatically enlisted into the army at like 22 or something.
Yeah.
I think when you're 18 you have to be enlisted into a restaurant to like
Okay,
just
so
understand for like
this
for like 6 months.
this is such an interesting thing actually because okay, sort of radical, a little off topic. I actually think that we should have mandatory community service in America. Like
Mm,
I think that people as like a part of our civic duty of belonging to a place should contribute to the country that they live in. This is a controversial idea. Well, I don't want to go too into it, and that's okay. But like in other countries, it's always military stuff, and like you
yeah,
have to join the military. I don't think people should have to do that. I think it should be like mandatory but you can choose what you want to do. Like you can go work in a library or you can go work and take care of like the gardens in a public garden or like something like
right.
that, but I
Yeah.
feel like it's so fun if we had, like, restaurants clued into that too. Although, that might be a little bit weird
Might
because
be a
there's a
little
lot of
hard because that, yeah, you're almost
Yeah,
working for free.
yeah.
I like the thought, but I think what would be interesting is that maybe it worked like a tax break, right? So there's money
Yeah.
involved. So like, hey, if you're providing community service by doing a beach cleanup or whatever, you get it signed off, and maybe I don't know, you get some break off of your taxes
Yeah,
somehow. Like
or
it would be
something.
an interesting incentive.
Yeah, but, like, oh, yeah, or student loan
Student loan
forgiveness.
forgiveness, like
Oh,
just
yeah.
anything, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
just
yeah.
I think that's a fascinating idea.
Yeah. So, putting that aside kind of,
Okay.
because I feel like that's kind of in the same vein of where we're going here. I do think there's, like, this old adage in life, I feel like, where everyone should work in customer service, like, at some point in their life just to see what it's like because it is so horrifying. Like, I've
Yeah.
so many, like, terrible, terrible stories I've heard of people working in the food industry or in, like, a service industry, and I do think that people need the experience. Like, it treats you better than any teacher I've ever had, how to be kind, how to be respectful, how to keep your hands to yourself, and,
Yep.
like, how to stay in your own lane, basically.
Yep. And
And, yeah.
so in that vein, what was your first job? Just your first job?
Okay, so I'm a little capitalist at heart and I dreamed of having a job growing up. I really, really wanted a job and I always wanted to work in a Baskin Robbins. So that was like my
Okay.
gold standard because I freaking love ice cream and I was like, it'd be so amazing to work there. Sadly, that dream never came true, although Baskin Robbins, if you're out there and you're watching, I would love to work at a Baskin Robbins. I don't know why, it just fills me with
Just
so
do it
much
for a couple
joy.
days. Just
I
reach
think
out
it
to them.
I think it would be so fun. I just really wanna try it. But, like, my first job, actually, I applied around town a lot. I was just really interested to get a job, but nobody else was getting a job. Like, growing up for me, it was not as common for my, like, classmates to have jobs, and I don't know if it was the school that I went to or
Mhm.
what, but, like, people just weren't really working, and so it was really, really hard to find part-time work. So, like, I went around applying at a bunch of places. I applied at, like, one of those flower arranging, like, the fruit flower
Oh, yeah,
arranging,
yeah. Oh, God, what are they
edible
called?
arrangements.
Yeah, edible arrangements, yeah.
Yeah, I applied there. I applied at my favorite cupcake bakery. They were so mean. Honestly, I went in and they were so rude to me that I, like, stopped going there. Even though I used to go every single day after school. Um, where else did I go? I just applied all around town, and then finally, very luckily, I do think I was lucky, we had some family friends who ran this shop called Dream Dinners, and Dream Dinners,
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
have you heard of it before?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it like, the premise is that basically you can go in and you can pay for, like, a six-pack or a 12-pack of pre-made meals, but, like, you go in and you assemble them all, like, like, let's say one of the menu items is lasagna. You go to the lasagna station, you put it all together, and then
Oh,
you
the
just
you as like, the customer assembles
the
them.
customer assembles it.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
okay.
and so it's kinda like cooking, and, like, they would have, like, wine there, you could, like, drink a little, and you're
Mhm.
just assembling your 6 meals or your
Okay.
12 meals or whatever, and you pop them in the freezer, and you just take them out as the week goes on, put something in the oven, and it's very easy and simple, and it's, like, supposed to be the solution for hardworking moms. It's basically it was meal prep before meal prep was, like, a
Right,
thing,
right.
like, a
An
popular
easy
thing to
way
do.
of meal prepping, essentially, yeah.
Exactly, and it would be so fun because you would go in, you don't need to buy the ingredients on your own, it's just all set up for there, there's different stations, and you just you follow the recipe, put everything in as you're supposed to, and then you're out of there. So that was my first job, and I was in charge of washing dishes, which is so fun, I love washing dishes, which is maybe controversial, but I also was in charge of prepping all of the stations, so I'd have to put all the food out and, like, load up the bins with, like, the right ingredients and stuff like that, and then at night, of course, cleaning up shop and, like, doing
Yep.
all of the sanitizing of the stations and everything. So that was my first job, and it was really, really fun. I really enjoyed it a
And
lot. I
and so that's technically, like, service industry and customer service,
Yep, yep,
right?
I think
So, like,
so.
with that experience, what were your takeaways that now you've, like, looked back on, right? To say, "Oh, okay, if I didn't
Ye
have this job, I wouldn't have, like, known this or seen this coming," or whatever it is.
That job taught me so much responsibility. Like, I did not know what it was to be responsible until I had bosses that I needed to report to. Like, I remember one day I was late. My dad had to drive me over from school every day that I worked. I worked like 2 times a week or
Mhm.
something like that. And he would drive me over, and one day, like, the traffic was bad. We just got out late, and I got there, and my bosses were like, "Where were you?" And I was like, "The I was the traffic." And they're like, "Why didn't you call? Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you let us
Oh,
know?" Like, I wasn't that late, like, maybe 15 minutes or whatever, but they were like, "You need to tell us and, like, keep us updated and let us know." And that was, like, a shock to me. I was like, "Oh, I guess I could have called you, and I don't know why I didn't think about doing that." But yeah.
it's 'cause you're young, you're like, "Eh, it doesn't matter that much. It's
Yeah,
just people packing lasagna."
I was like 14, 15. I was pretty
Yeah.
young, and I had never had, like, any kind of work experience really prior to this, so that taught me something. I would say that I had only positive interactions with customers, like, I don't think it was a difficult customer service job. I think it just really taught me, A, health and, like, sanitary, like, how to be sanitary in the kitchen and how to, like, sanitize things and the proper procedures that you go through to make sure everything is good and, like, you can serve it to people. But also just responsibility and, like, more than anything, it taught me the power of saving money because I saved every single paycheck I got from that job and, like, um, yeah, by the time I got to college, I had, like, a pretty hefty chunk of money, like, put away just because my parents gave me allowance every week, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna save all this money, and it'll pay off
Mhm.
later." And then it did. I went into college pretty well, so
That's
yeah.
awesome. That's
Yeah.
like that to me, when I hear stuff like that, it's like you're actually taking away life lessons in a way. Maybe it's like learning how to save money, right?
Yeah,
Whatever the case
yeah.
is. I didn't really have that with my first job. My first job was GameStop. And
Oh!
yeah, because I wanted to go in, like, graphic design and game design and all this other
Oh,
stuff, and that
okay.
was one of the worst work environments I've ever worked in,
Oh
and
gosh.
it was so bad. It's like your life is basically alphabetizing used games, right, and
Oh,
upselling stuff to things to people that they didn't want, and, like, taking stuff that people wanted to get rid of, whatever it was. But, like, for that takeaway, it kind of led me into realizing, like, the managers we worked with weren't the best and whatever the case was. And
yeah.
so I had a lot of respect for managers that did have it together when I got
Mm,
into the culinary world. And
yeah.
that came down to, like, my first culinary experience, and like the the struggles of working in the field are different than managing the field, right? And
For
by the
sure.
field, I mean like the restaurants. So my first restaurant job was right out of culinary school, and the head chef, Chef Jay, he like was never angry. Whatever. It's more of the I'm not angry, I'm disappointed, right? Like that mood if you
Yeah.
mess something up. And so like you didn't want to disappoint Jay because he's the nicest guy, but
Yeah.
always had everything together. Schedules were done on time. Prep was always ready to go for us. Like, the menus were dialed in. We always had tastings. He always had family meal. Like
Yeah.
it was awesome. It was also part of a hotel.
Yeah.
So the thing was is that that came with the upper management who I felt were super disconnected from how the restaurant operated. So
Mm.
because the restaurant was like not in the
Yeah.
hotel, it was, outside of it in the little like it was a little strip mall area, not a strip mall. I don't know what you would call it, but it's part of the hotel. And then across from it were like 3 to 4 restaurants that all were owned by the hotel. So we were
Yeah.
one of them. And it was the Japanese sushi California fusion food.
Mm.
And what the upper management like to do is they like to come down and they would try stuff and be like, we don't know if this works. And Jay would look at them and be like, that's one of our best sellers though. Like it literally sells out almost every night.
Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe we should try something different. And
Why?
okay, maybe to just change it up, to be fresh, right?
Mhm.
To maybe
Mhm.
have a new experience on the menu. And I just remember this very specifically. It was like our signature dish, and it was called like the crispy pork. And it was like this bulgogi marinated pork that was
Yum.
marinated for a minimum of 2 days. And it was pork shoulder and I think a little bit of pork belly in there. And then you marinated it and you fried it in a wok. So a little bit of oil, then you dump the whole thing into a wok. You get it really fried and crispy. You end up taking it out of the wok. You put it into we use pie dishes, right? So
Yeah.
aluminum pie pans were our prep things, and they're freaking amazing for that. And then you have your bok choy and your green onions and they were
Yum.
glass noodles that went with it, right? Like all these
Ooh.
things, and you remove the oil, but you left some of the fat in there, and then you threw
Yeah.
in all of your veg and your glass noodles, and then put the pork back in. You mixed it. It was this fantastic dish. Okay,
Yum.
it was
That
on the
sounds
menu for
incredible.
it was on the menu for the entire time I was there. So I was only at that restaurant for about a year and a half, but they had it longer, and it was one of our best sellers.
Mhm.
And I just remember management coming down and like, well, we want to take the the restaurant into a new direction, and they wanted to do like Japanese Spanish tapas. It was the weirdest thing. And like I'm
Okay.
all about small bites, right? Like
Yeah.
it's fun, but you're you're completely 180ing the restaurant and things are working, and we're tweaking stuff constantly.
Yeah.
And that was something that I saw happen over and over again, where you have like upper management super disconnected, just comes down, want to basically put their foot where it doesn't belong and say, well, I'm your boss, so
So this is how it's gonna
this
be.
is how it's going to go.
Dude.
And I have seen that very often in the restaurant industry,
Mm.
very often. And I will say, like, there were times where even though like someone was my boss, I treated them with respect, but I would push back. It was like, no, this
Mm.
stays.
Yeah.
Like we can change
Yeah.
something else, but this stays. And they would, sometimes they would give some pushback or whatever, like, do you want to do it? You can run it. And I was just
Mm.
like, I would always say like, hey, if you want to run this thing, then just change the whole menu because it's no
Mm.
longer mine. And not to be like conceited or sound arrogant, but it's like these things are working, people are enjoying them. We've had no complaints. Like I don't know where this is coming from,
Yeah.
but it always came to that. It always felt
Yeah.
like when new management comes through,
They wanna
it's
change something.
they want to change something that's working. I can understand changing things that don't work,
Yeah.
like because I've done that. I've taken over restaurants and I'm like, this none of this works.
Yeah.
You're paying like 40% food costs. We're just bleeding money. The customers aren't happy. Food's being thrown out because you're not using it. Like that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think it has to do with like corporate in particular. They're
Mm.
just, unless it's a big initiative or a big change, I don't see where management like that comes from, right? And
Mm.
and I don't know if you've experienced this, but just like it
I It's so
sometimes it makes me
funny.
so angry.
Ironically, I haven't experienced that in the food service industry, and I think in the places that I've worked, and I think it's because, again, at this, like, Dream Dinners location, it was very much run by 2 like, a couple who just they picked what they wanted to put on the menu, and they did their own thing, and it was fine. So they didn't really have to worry about any of that. It was, like, very much their thing that they were doing. And then the other job that I had, I worked at a diner called Black Bear Diner, and it was like a franchise, like, basically
I
it's
think
a
I've
chain.
yeah, I think I've heard of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, it's a chain, and then people can open their own locations, but they all pull from the same menu, so and
Mhm.
there's, like and they put specials on the menu that you can, like, order as part of the store and, like, get the ingredients for it and stuff, but because it's part of a bigger thing, no one really had to, like, create anything, no one was
Right,
designing their own menu or
right,
whatever,
right.
and in that sense, like, my I felt my bosses there were really good because they showed up, they did their job, and they went home, and, like, they gave us our schedule, they told us what we needed to do,
Mhm.
and then we all did it, and it worked really, really well for the most part. Um, so yeah, I didn't really have that experience, but I feel like people get the idea that running a restaurant is easy or something. I don't know why people think that,
Yeah.
but I think that, like, people look at trends and they're like, "Oh, tapas, small bites are really in, we need to be doing that. Why aren't we doing that?"
Yeah,
And it's
because it
like,
doesn't make
well,
sense on your restaurant.
and
Yeah.
there's no concept of, like, who's our clientele? Who comes into our restaurant? Who's eating with us? Who are our regulars? Why are they our regulars? Why are they drawn to this place? What do they wanna eat here? And, like, when you just try to follow a trend without actually looking at the root of the issue, if there is an issue in your restaurant and, like, assessing, do we need change? Why do we need change?
Mhm.
Then it's basically a huge, I think, financial, costly mistake to be
Oh,
just making
absolutely.
crazy changes to a restaurant like that because and that's the thing that I don't think people who've ever spent time in a kitchen understand. Like, buying the equipment you need is expensive
Yep.
and it takes up space. Buying the ingredients you need, if you're not buying in bulk and doing it right, is expensive.
Mhm.
And like that's why I personally have just so much respect for the home cooks who can like pop up in their fridge and pull out anything inside and just throw it together because making your ingredients go together and being able to think on the fly and combine stuff and like maybe have a special for the night that's using up excess ingredients is really hard to do.
Yep.
And, it just seems like people come in with these, like, grand ideas of, like, "Oh, we have this restaurant here that's attached to this other, like, the hotel or whatever, like, let's just" it's who cares what's going on here? And, like, completely, like, ignoring the fact that a restaurant is a business just like anything else and that you have to do the same thing you would for a restaurant as you would anything else. Like,
Yep.
you can't
And
just yeah, people think, "Oh, I'll just open a restaurant and people will come." Like, no,
doesn't
that's not
work.
how it
Yeah, it
works.
doesn't work. And
Yeah.
there's something to be said on that. So that same restaurant, Cafe Japango that I worked at, I don't think they're around anymore. I think they actually have one location left in Maui, maybe,
Oh gosh,
which is
okay.
a
So that would
fantastic.
yeah,
It's a
that would make
fantastic
sense.
spot. Like we went there for our honeymoon
Yeah.
to that Cafe Japango while I was still working for the hotel, so they very much hooked you up.
Yeah.
It becomes family, like, oh, you're
Yeah.
an employee, okay, cool, we got you. But
Yeah.
that hotel, that same one, they had a like nightclub in the hotel, right?
Yeah.
And it was the place to be in La Jolla, San Diego for a
Hmm.
very long time. The problem was is that it got noisy because it's a club,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah.
guests would complain and whatever. And I get it. I've been in hotels where I'm like, I can't sleep because it's so noisy outside, right?
Yeah.
I've been there. But what ended up happening is they went like people would go to Japango where I worked, and it would be full all night. Like an hour past closing, people are still eating
Still
because
there,
they
wow.
sat down like 5 minutes before close, and we still
Oh,
had to feed them. And there would
yeah.
be a line from like the restroom, and people are like giving shots to the cooks, and like it was
Yeah.
wild, right?
Yeah.
As soon as as soon as management decided to make the ultimatum of like, we want this to be more of a business focused hotel, so we have to remove the nightclub, everything dropped by like 30 or 40%. Like, because no one came through anymore. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, this is not the place to be anymore. We don't want to hang out here. So we're
Yeah.
not going to go to the restaurant and then go to the hotel
Yeah.
was double dipping. People would go to the restaurant, eat sushi, get sake, and then go to the hotel's club. Right.
Yeah.
And it was this big thing. Everybody did it. Once they did that, once management changed that, everything changed. Like everything just slowed down almost a 180 of doing 3 or
Wow.
400 covers a night to like barely breaking
Wow.
200. That's
Wow.
scary, right? When you're looking at it, you're like, "Oh my god, it's Friday night and we're slow."
Yeah.
right,
That's
and those are
bad.
right, and, since then, I still speak to some of the managers that work for those hotels, and they've recovered fine, and, they're still gonna make all of their money, but it took them a long time to realize, like, we messed up our clientele, and it's going to take us a long time to
To get
build
it
up a
back.
new clientele, right?
Yeah.
Not even you're not bringing them back. You're not bringing back any of them. You have to
Yeah.
find
Like a
new
whole
people.
new yeah.
Right, so it's the same issue like you were talking about of, like, you can't just change your menu to tapas, right?
Yeah.
If there's a place that I really wanna visit called Matt's Barbecue in Portland, I think we talked about this before, and they do,
Mm.
like, barbecue tacos, like brisket tacos,
Yum.
right? And that's what he does, and he's known for it, but then what if all of a sudden he's only doing vegan food? I'm like, "Sure, it's
Mm.
probably gonna be good," but I'm like, "No, dude, I want brisket tacos,"
Yeah,
right?
like,
That
that's not why I come here,
Right,
yeah.
and I think that there's a couple of struggles that I've personally seen in the restaurant industry, and it's things like that, where they just change things randomly without
Mm.
testing. So instead, maybe you do a special, and then the special does really well for a couple of nights, and maybe you're like,
Yeah.
"Hey, we should revisit that and just put it on the menu and see how it does on the menu full time or whatever,"
Yeah, yeah,
instead of doing these crazy 180s. The
yeah.
other thing that I've seen is where like management in particular just doesn't show up. Like what you said is the like people were there and doing their job and stuff like that. I've worked with people who are just perpetually drunk, right? Like,
Oh.
yeah, like I can smell whiskey
Oh.
on your breath and it's 8 in the morning and we're doing inventory before St. Patrick's Day, right?
That's
At an
rough.
at an Irish pub. Like
Yeah,
this is a real
this
scenario
is
because St.
bad.
Patrick's Day is coming up in the States. Uh,
Yeah.
and you run into that a lot, and I think it comes down to a couple of things, like arrogance in the form of chefs a lot of the times, right? Like, I can do no wrong. Um, Also owners wanting certain things and chefs wanting certain things. So there's a lot of headbutting in the industry. Have you
Yeah.
have you seen the movie Chef with John
Um,
Favreau?
no, I
Oh my
don't
god, is
think
it
so.
I think it's free on YouTube right now, on YouTube Movies. I'm not
Chef
you you have to watch it. It's John Favreau, movie Chef, and it is probably one of the best culinary movies I've ever seen, right?
Okay.
I don't want to spoil too much because it's a fantastic movie. I've probably watched it like 30 times. It's actually
Wow, this
um,
cast is
it's so
legit.
good. Yeah, it's so good. Uh, that movie is what I am using for inspiration for my trip to Japan, right? So like it's that
Mm.
storyline.
Okay.
But in that movie, the chef and the owner of a restaurant clash because the chef
Mm.
wants to try some new things, but he wants to revamp a lot of it, do
Yeah,
completely new things. The owner is like, "No, this like it's my money that's going into this, so stay with the old stuff." And there's a
yeah.
lot of frustration there, and I think both of them are wrong, right?
Mm.
You have to understand like the owner is the owner for a reason. He's putting his money on the line. He's
Mhm.
paying for everybody's salaries and whatever. But then the chef is the creative person who wants to keep upping the game. There
Yeah.
has to be a compromise. Like, what if instead of changing the whole menu, you come up to the owner and say, "Hey, Jim, like, I don't know what the hell his name was. I'm just using Jim. You know, hey, Jim, today I got some really great pork belly in. We're going to run a special." The owner
Yeah,
probably like, "Oh, great, run the special." And then
yeah.
if the special sells out, maybe you run it again one other night. If it sells out again a couple of months from now when you're changing the menu, be like, "Hey Jim, remember when we did that pork belly special and we sold out night after night? What if we put it on the menu but just tweak a few things for the season?"
Mhm,
Jim probably be like, "Yeah, let's do it."
mhm.
Right?
That's
That
the thing too. It's
that's
like
the compromise.
it's a partnership between I feel like, a lot of people don't think about this, but there's so much creativity that goes into being a chef or being
Mhm,
someone who's, like, putting a menu together. And you have to find that balance. Like, I think of cooking as a very creative thing personally. I
mhm,
think of, like, creation, like, physically making something and then plating it artistically is a creative thing for me, but also that recipe development, coming up with the perfect menu is, like, very much a hobby of mine. I
yep,
love making menus for different events. Um, and it is I think what people don't understand is that you need that element of creativity in a restaurant in some ways to
mhm.
do well. Not always, like with Black Bear Diner, right? It was just
Yeah,
this franchise, but like, and they got by on the like kitsch of the place. Like it was a little log cabin, and there were bears everywhere, and
that's fair.
they everyone wore
But you know
suspenders.
what you're getting.
Yeah, you know what you're getting. there's a little bit of a cute story there, and customers are charmed by it, right?
Yeah.
But I think with like any meaningful restaurant, you need a chef who's got a vision, who really wants to push the boundaries, create something new. Or I mean, depending on what their goal is, some chefs just want to serve good food to people, and they don't want to like reinvent anything. They just want to make people happy and
Yeah.
feel good. And like that's a very totally awesome goal to have. But having the because in a kitchen you've got to think on the fly so often, we're problem solving constantly, like, oh shoot, this just got like an extra minute on the flame, I need to pull that off, and like, oh, how are we going to work around this? Or for me, when I'm decorating cakes, like, ah, shit, like I really messed up that like border of leaves, how am I
Yeah.
going to cover that up? You just have to like problem solve, problem solve, problem solve. And sometimes that is like very good in the moment. When you're thinking like long term, it may not, it kind of like sometimes contrasts with what an owner's vision is of their restaurant, or like a sense of needing security because they're putting their money into it, and how do we know that we're going to
Mhm.
make a profit? So there is that really delicate balance that kind of has to go on, and I don't think people like really consider that so much, which is why, I don't know about you, but when people come into restaurants and they try to like ask for stuff like, oh, I want the pasta, but can you take the broccoli out or whatever,
Yeah.
unless it's for an allergy, it's really annoying because 'cause I'm like, "You don't understand, like, the chef put so much time and energy into creating this
Mhm.
thing for you to try, and the flavors go together, like, try it." And it really annoys me.
I I think it's twofold though, right? So at a place like, let's say Denny's,
Mm,
right, that I'm going to, I will just order it as it is because I
right.
actually know a lot of the time it's actually very difficult at places like that to remove something depending
Mm.
on what it is.
Depending on what it
But
is, yeah.
right, and but at the same time, I'm like, well, if it's a standard menu, you can say, "Hey, I want my omelet with no tomatoes." Easy, right? They just
Mm,
do no tomatoes. But then if I'm going to a tasting dinner where I'm
mm.
paying like the last tasting dinner we did was a few months ago, and it was that Thai tasting, and it was $160 a person or
Oh,
$170. It was
oh.
expensive, but it was like 14 courses, right? So
Yeah,
it was fantastic.
yeah.
I'm not saying nothing. I'm just gonna sit there. I'm
Yeah.
gonna wait for the food to come. I'm gonna eat it.
You're
And I'm
paying,
gonna wait for the
yeah,
next plate. I'm not gonna say
yeah.
anything. The
Because
only
you're
thing
you're
is,
paying taste, you
yeah,
wanna
you're
try new
paying for
flavors.
the experience. You're paying for what they have created. It's their form of art, right?
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
spend $300, which is still a crazy amount of money. Like, don't think that I do this often. I think we do it like once for our anniversary every year, and we just go
Yeah.
out, right? But I would rather do that than like buy a piece of artwork.
Mm, mm.
Nothing against, like, I put up some prints over here somewhere, right? From like one of my friends who's an artist. Like, I love
Mm,
artwork, but I think it's the same way. Imagine if you went up to an artist and be like, "Hey, I really like this, but can you
mm,
not put blue in there? I'm not a big fan of
mm.
blue, right? Just remove the
Yeah.
blue. I just
It
want to,
just
just no blue."
Yeah, you don't
Like,
do
you
that.
can't. Sometimes you can't do that, and I think that that can often lead to chefs losing it. Like, I've
Mm,
seen this happen, right?
mm,
In many a restaurant where you're I this is so bad. Like, we used to do when we would get swamped for like Valentine's Day, and we'd be doing like a Valentine's Day special menu, and it was reservation only, and like, you can't really do many substitutions because you have things that are
yeah.
ready ahead of time so you can feed 400 people a night,
That many
whatever it
people,
was,
yeah.
right? And it usually came down to, hey, I just don't want raspberries on the creme brulee. That's cool. We don't have to put anything. That's fine. Here's your creme brulee. Be happy. But
Mm,
there are sometimes where people will be like, hey, I really want the I remember this distinctly. We did a short rib, and it was like this beautiful short rib. We braised it for like 16 hours, right? The
ooh,
whole 9 yards.
ooh,
We turned the liquid into jus, and it was served with that, and it was served with this beautiful mashed potatoes and like a little bit of broccolini. Very simple but delicious.
yeah.
And the short rib had like some juniper and some garlic and whatever. And we had one of the servers, and we always did uh what, oh my god, what is it called? It's not family meal, but
Like a tasting
we
beforehand?
did a tasting of stuff, right? So
Yeah,
for servers to taste everything that we would put out, so they understood what to tell the guest.
yeah.
And we told them what was in the brine and everything. And we see people writing it down, and kid you not, we would have people come back and be like, "Hey, we really, they want to order the short rib, but they don't want the juniper berries." And I'm like,
It's
"Yeah,
not
they're not
a
going to get any. That's fine. There's no juniper berries in it." They're like, "Okay,
yeah,
cool." Because if I have to go in it, like, they probably expect it to be like a berry or
yeah,
whatever it is. But I've
yeah,
seen chefs like, "What do you mean you don't want juniper berries? It's in the brine and blah blah
yeah,
blah."
like, we can't take it out.
I try to approach it of just like a
Mm,
miss from
Yeah,
maybe the server's end. And juniper berries, maybe people think it's like a berry that you
an
eat versus
actual
a
yeah.
spice, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I have a lot of forgiveness for that because I know
Mm,
that food knowledge, even for me, is very limited, right?
mm,
Not a lot of
mm,
people know a lot about food.
mm,
I always say I know like less than 1% of everything there is to know about food.
mm.
And that's why I'm always so interested in it.
Yeah.
So if somebody else doesn't know something, I can't get on them about
Yeah,
that. But
yeah.
I've seen chefs get on people about it. And
Mm.
that, like, the substitution thing and things like that. And it's, it is difficult, but also I don't want it to seem like restaurants are all bad, right? Because
Mm.
we've talked about the struggles of it, but like, what's
Yeah.
one of your most fond memories of restaurants? Because okay, this is so bad, right? Like, before you answer the question, this is what it
Yeah.
reminds me of. I play a lot of D&D, or I did,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
D&D campaigns. So for those of you who don't know what D&D is, it's Dungeons and Dragons, and those game sessions I can remember like reading a book because
Mm.
you are the character, you're exploring a world, you're creating it. I remember D&D sessions just like I remember some of my favorite restaurant experiences with my crew. Like, it's like it just creates a story. So I'll let you gush. I want you to go.
Well, I will say, I don't know if I have any particular I don't think I remember quite in the same way that you might. I remember, like, certain interactions with people, like, I had one waitress friend who, was really sweet, and we would always talk books when we were on shift together. So,
Okay.
like, she would come over and be like, "Oh, have you read this book?" And I'd be like, "No, but did you hear about this one, blah, blah, blah?" And we just had, like she was, like, my book buddy, and she would always bring me books, and I would just, like, be on my break, like, reading books and, like, having a great time. I, I don't know, just, like, moments of people. There was one waitress who worked there who that was, like, what she did full time. She worked at this diner that I worked at, and she worked at another diner, same diner, but, like, in a different, like, city, and so she would work one shift in the morning, one shift in the evening, and she would horrify me. I think she took delight in, like, traumatizing me. She
Okay.
would horrify me. She'd tell me these stories of, like, customer experiences that she's had or like weird books that she's read and just like watch my poor little I was like very young and very innocent. She would watch my poor little face just like curdle and like curl in and like I had another waitress who would torture he she would genuinely torture us because she would only tip out the hostesses, and at the time I was a hostess. She would only tip out hostesses if we had done enough to help out her tables. So she would like
Oh,
pit us against each other. It was like
yep.
in hindsight very funny, but in the moment very like dramatic. She would be like, "I don't know, Emily, like Jessica bust my tables way more often than needed today."
I would lose my crap. Oh my god, if I had like I don't know that I couldn't deal with it.
It was
How did you deal with it?
well, was and still to some degree am just like a little pushover, so I would just be like, "I'm so sorry, I'll do it better next time." I didn't know.
No. Be like, "Give me
This is
my
my
money."
this is my first like restaurant job ever. So I didn't
That's
really
fair. Yeah,
know
it's a little
how things
intimidating.
were supposed to be. And like even when I transitioned into being a waitress, like nobody taught me. Like I had not enough training to be a
Mhm.
waitress when I started waitressing. I made so many mistakes in the beginning. Um and so, yeah, I don't know, just, like, funny stories. I remember, there was we one of our cooks was deaf, and he was an awesome guy, like, he made the best chef like, specials, like, we'd put a special on the board every day, and he would always come up with them, and they were so, so good. But one he liked to surprise people, and he liked to, like, spook people a little bit, and anyone who knows me knows that I freak out. Like, if you come up behind me and I don't think you're gonna be there, I, like,
Just done.
freak out. I, like
Yeah.
I scream, I get so scared, and, I was at, like, the window and just, like, collecting food and, like, layering it we had
Yo,
these
yeah.
giant plates, and so we'd stack them, like, all the way
Oh
up
my god,
here.
that always makes me so nervous. Yeah.
And it should, and yet somehow it just feels so right when you've got, like, plate, 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 and then you're like, "I got another plate in this hand, like, here we go." Like,
Nope.
I don't know. It was all fine. So I was like cleaning up the service station or something, and all of a sudden he takes his metal spatula and just thwacks it down on the counter so loud that like I like jump and I like throw the syrup everywhere, and he's like laughing, And
That is not cool.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe this is just stories of me being tortured at this at this establishment. But I think he thought it was really funny, but he was deaf, so he couldn't hear how loud it was. Like I don't think he understood
Yeah.
how genuinely like loud and startling it was. Um so that was a funny moment and yeah, just like weird stuff. We used to have like roaches and I remember we would always be battling the roaches and
What?
one yeah,
That
yeah,
is
yeah.
like you get shut down for that.
We is that a bad thing? I was just
Yo
like, I'm sure all restaurants have cockroaches.
no. That is literally so if you have roaches because they carry disease, you can literally be shut down.
Oh, so we would
Oh my
spray
god.
all the time. We would always have people coming in and spraying and like whatever. So I know that our like management was really on top of it, but one time,
No,
but
dude.
in hindsight, maybe not. One time, there was just like I was like rolling silverware and there was a guy sitting at the counter next to me and he was just like, "Hey," and I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Look," and I was like, "Oh," and there was just a little cockroach just
Oh!
running across, like, one of the, like, back shelves or whatever, and I was like, "Oh," and he's
No.
like, "Don't worry." He was like this tough guy, he's like, "Whatever, all restaurants have cockroaches or whatever," and I was like,
No, they don't.
"Oh."
No, they
Oh my
don't.
god. Now I'm realizing that maybe this place was a real
No.
hellhole. Wow,
No.
anyone who's listening that, goes to the Blackberry Diner in Davis, California, don't trust it. Don't trust it. That's the message that we're learning here.
No. Like, I can
Yeah.
understand even this is beyond like I've worked in some places where like there's a lot of grease or whatever build up and like you gotta walk in there and just be like, okay, I'm just
Yeah.
gonna clean today kind of thing. Which luckily I haven't worked in many of those places because I
Mm.
like making sure that my stuff is clean before because
Yeah.
you're cooking for people.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
I thankfully have never been in a place where we've had like an infestation of anything because that I couldn't do it. I'd walk in there
I
for the interview, I'd be like,
would be
I'm
like,
out.
"No, I'm
Like,
out."
sorry.
I would say too, like, it wasn't like it was unclean, like, we cleaned a lot and extensively, and, like, we all had, like, chores, like, we didn't it wasn't unclean, but, yeah, I don't know. I guess they must have had more going on than I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I was pretty oblivious when I started working
a
there.
lot of the time when you have something like that, it has to do with usually like food is left out or on the floor somewhere, and you think
Mm,
it's clean, but maybe like your rice is resting on the floor when it needs to be like 6 inches above the ground on a rack, like little
yeah,
simple things like that. And
yeah.
it's wild, not to gross anybody out because I say 90% of restaurants out there, which is actually 10% is not a good number
No, it's
either,
not.
but you're gonna have a fine experience, right?
Yeah.
I don't know because like as someone who's also passionate about food, like if you're a restaurant owner, you want people to enjoy your food and not worry about eating there or whatever. I think we've all had our little bouts of food poisoning, right? Which is not
Yeah,
enjoyable.
that's fair. Yeah.
But at the same time, you can't walk into a place assuming that you're gonna get it. So I get that, but as like we used to do weekly cleanings, like not just oh we're wiping stuff down because that happened every night, and we had the luxury of being in a big hotel. You would have a night crew who came in and like tore everything down and cleaned
Yeah.
everything, did all the floors. But then I would make my crew and myself, we would go and like take everything out of the walk-ins and scrub everything down, then put everything back, right? Because
Yeah.
like like you didn't want people to come in and see your house a mess is
Mm,
how I kind of attributed it to. So I'm thankful that I've never had memories of that. Like
mm,
some of my most fond memories, I actually have two that stick out to me the most because I just like the industry too much. So
mm,
and both of them were at the same restaurant, funnily enough.
mm.
One of them was I think it was New Year's Eve, and it was because people would come in for dinner and then they would all party, right? Because we were very close to downtown San Diego.
Yeah.
I remember I'm like searing scallops because I'm on the saute station, just like searing scallops, making risotto, right? Because you're doing it
Yeah.
like fresh every order, right? And you only have 7 entrees or whatever for seafood, so you're probably selling a lot of scallops, whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, it's 5 p.m. and you're just cranking, and then all of a sudden it's like 7:30, and you're like, oh my
Mm,
god, we haven't like stopped. I
yeah.
remember looking over to my buddy Joaquin. I love this guy to death, fantastic chef, and he's just because he's on the grill station and I would have to like float between our stations, right? Because I was the middle
Mm,
person, and I'd help him like put down steaks and get plates ready and whatever. And I look over to him and he takes the tickets out of the machine and he just wraps them around his neck. and then he keeps searing steaks, and we got through it, right? But like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
how many like moments like that you just
Yeah,
have to kind of laugh and
yeah.
just keep going.
Just keep
And
going.
that same crew, we had a similar night like that, but it was 4th of July. And
Mm,
because we were by the beach, like 4th of July is massive out there.
mm,
You get absolutely slammed and you can't go home because
mm.
there's one lane to get to the freeway. And
Oh,
after fireworks, when
it's
everybody's leaving the
packed.
beach
Yeah.
and you're trying to just go home after getting absolutely slammed all night, you
Oh.
can't leave. So
Mm,
what we would do instead is someone would have a 6-pack of beer that they bought and they
mm,
would put it in the walk-in, right?
mm.
It's like kind of hide it because you're not supposed to have obviously not supposed to have beer.
Yeah, yeah,
And during 4th every year, because I was there for 9 years, like 4th of July, we'd bust out our 6-pack and we would walk the opposite way everyone else was going to the beach,
yeah.
drinking beer and going. And then we
Nice,
finally get tacos and it's like midnight when we can finally leave. Right.
nice.
And it's like after 1 or 2 beers and some tacos, it's like you remember those moments.
Yeah.
And I never experienced those moments working in an office. Right. Like
Mm.
I never experienced those moments working for GameStop.
Well,
Like,
that's the thing too. That's why they call it, like, family meal at a
yeah.
restaurant, which
Yeah.
again, I never really experienced that. My restaurant was very much like a franchise, like, diner location. It wasn't really like I wouldn't say I've ever worked in, like, a proper, like,
Okay.
restaurant in that sense,
In that
But,
sense.
like
Yeah.
but based on my kind of experiences, primarily watching The Bear on Hulu,
The bear's
I
so good.
I think that that's something that people don't understand is how much a restaurant it's not just serving food. Like, I remember being
Mhm.
really surprised when I started waitressing, I was given cleaning chores and, like,
Yeah.
I had to roll a certain amount of silverware and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And I remember being like, "I'm a waitress, like, why am I doing this?" But there is so much more that goes into working at a restaurant than you think. Like, it's
Mhm.
not just one job, like, you are working in a kitchen and everybody shares the work and shares the labor. And I think the bear really like does a good job of outlining that. Like, oh, everyone's there hours before the shop actually opens because they're prepping, they're getting stuff ready to go, they're like setting everything up, and they're having like the family dinner, and all of that is like part of working at a restaurant. That's not just your typical,
Yep.
I guess, like, and I guess you get paid for those hours too.
Yeah.
Um,
It's side
and
work. Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you should be paid for that.
Yeah, yeah. So and I think that that is a really cool thing, but it creates that dynamic because you are a team in a
Mhm.
way that, like, a football team is a team, or I don't know, something else is a team. And maybe in like good business settings or whatever, you may have smaller groups of people that you work with that kind of become your team, but there's just such a hands-on experience to cooking that I think it has a really different feel to it. Like, you
Yep.
and there's almost like a physical, like, health element too. Like, we are all depending on each other to pull this off because if we don't, like, someone's gonna get hurt, injured,
Yep.
burned, whatever, and, or the customers are gonna get sick, they're gonna go home and get food poisoning because we didn't do it right and we let them all down, and it's very much like a we're all rowing this boat together kind of situation, you
No,
know?
there is a lot of camaraderie. Like that is something that I have seen in the restaurant industry. It's like you are in this crap together.
Mm,
And there are very few, I think, industries like that.
mm,
Where I mean, I can't speak for many. I know that for people in law enforcement, they can feel like that. I know in the restaurant industry, you feel like that. Maybe even like on a construction site, I've worked construction where you feel like that. Like, yo, we got to get this done, right? Because I did AutoCAD and I used to help in like with the construction warehouse. It was have the weirdest like repertoire of jobs I've worked.
yeah.
Um, but I think in restaurants, it was always we're all trying to like if we started at 2 p.m., we technically had to be out of there by 10:30 because
Mm,
oh, you didn't want overtime, right? And it was just one of those
yeah.
things. But like we made it our best effort to make sure everyone got out. Even if
Mm,
you were done packing up your station and you're done or whatever, you made sure everyone was done by 10:30. So even if
mm,
you're ahead, it means somebody else might be behind. So you go
yeah.
help them, right?
Mm,
Help them put away their stuff, help them wipe everything down. Like just get
mm,
out of there together, right? And then go have a
yeah.
drink and just go enjoy the rest of the evening.
Mm,
There are very few industries that I've worked that are like that, and I
mm,
think that's also what I really miss.
mm,
So, it's right now, like, being a full-time content creator, especially solo most of the time, right? Like, and now Rachel is helping me, and it's like we had our first meeting, and it was fantastic. We sat at a
Yeah.
coffee shop for 4 hours, and we just went over stuff together.
Yeah.
Granted, the coffee shop does serve alcohol in their coffee at 10 a.m. But it was one of those like little like, hey, let's go have our first meeting because she was really nervous about it for some reason.
Yeah, yeah,
But like having that teamwork aspect is huge to me. I'm a huge
yeah.
team player. I love it because I feed off of people, and
Mhm.
if someone else is down, then I'm like, "Yo, what's wrong? How can I like what happened? Like what are we gonna
Yeah,
do?" So I don't know
yeah.
if you kind of vibe that way too.
I think that's such a joy of being, like, a human. This is, like, we're gonna
Yeah,
get, like, a
yeah,
little
being
hippie right
being a
now, but,
human
like,
being.
I think this is such a joy of being able to have those community, like, and, like, bonding relationships with people and really, like, go and help each other out and, like, problem solve and teamwork together, like,
Yep,
that's what we're good at. We like and I think all humans do to some extent, whether you're introvert or extrovert. You crave companionship. You wanna be there for people. You wanna know what's going on in people's lives and whatever, because I think for better or for worse, we're just so fueled by other people. We get
yeah,
inspired by other
we're
people.
social creatures.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that that is a difficult thing for you as, like, a content creator. I feel lucky in my day job, I have,
You can speak to humans and not cats
I
all day.
yeah, exactly, and then, my friend Joe works with me on a lot of my YouTube stuff, and
Yeah,
that changed the game for me. Like, I was ready to just give up on content creation entirely because it was just so hard constantly
it
doing it by
is.
yourself and
Yep,
always feeling like you're failing and always feel like it's not successful. But working with someone else, it's so much easier to be like, "Oh, we tried that together and it didn't go well, but we had fun doing it,
yep,
so I guess it wasn't a total failure, like, we learned something, like, let's move on to the next thing."
yeah.
And that has completely changed the game for me, and I think that, there is something that is just so, like, affirming about our ability to do that as humans, is, like, when you have someone else there who's in it with you, who wants to problem solve with you, it just makes such a huge difference. Yeah.
I agree, and I think that for people listening to, like, for maybe those who are, like, hesitant to go into the restaurant industry and maybe, they're not quite sure what it's like, it's like every job where there are a
Yeah.
lot of hardships,
Ups
but
and downs.
there's a lot of ups and there's a lot of downs, and
Yeah.
I personally think that the ups are better,
Mm.
because, you can have fun in a kitchen. You can have fun doing what you're doing, feeding other people, whatever the case is, and I never really found that in a lot of other jobs. Aside, I actually really enjoy content creation. I like talking about it. I like because it's to me, content creation reminds me of working in a restaurant to an extent where like it's always evolving. And so you're
Mm.
trying to keep up with the times, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah,
Right.
for
Like
sure.
you're trying to make it to where you're not falling behind.
Mhm.
And you're like adjusting here and there. You're doing different things to kind of keep up, but also not change who you are.
Mm.
And which I think is very, very important.
Yeah,
And I think that's why I've fallen into this and I haven't gotten bored yet. That's been a big thing. I haven't gotten bored of content creation. And I don't
that's
think I
good.
will. I don't think I will.
Well, once you're your own boss too, it is so hard to go back to
Yeah,
having a boss and kind of doing all that, and once you can be fully creative on your own terms, I don't know, I just really think that, like, I this is why I feel bad for kids in America or whatever who don't have creative, like, we've taken the arts completely out of education, and, like, that's not really an aspect that we focus on very much anymore, in terms of, like, funding, like, public school funding and that kind
right.
of thing, and I just feel so bad because I feel like the point of being a human is creating and being imaginative and just stretching our brain to the furthest limits we can get it, and I feel
Yep.
like we're just constantly and tragically stuck in this cycle of like, "Oh, how do we avoid war with this country again?"
Yeah.
Kind of thing, you know what I mean? And it is I was talking about this with my friend Joe the other day. I was like, "Would I rather be, like, making a lot of money and just be totally creatively uninspired or be poor, but at least, like, I feel like I'm living on the edge of the world?" Like, when
Right.
we're doing creative stuff and I'm learning new skills,
It's
I might
so
not
much
be making
fun.
money, but I feel alive in a
Yep.
way that I don't feel, when I'm, like, cashing in my paycheck, which is funny because, again, I'm a filthy little capitalist and I love making
I'm a
money.
filthy
Like,
capitalist. Yeah.
not to say that I don't, but I just feel, like, alive, like, my brain is on fire when I'm doing this and I'm being creative and I'm problem solving and I'm like, how do we do this? How do we do that?
Yeah.
Like I want to create a video that teaches people about this thing. Like what's the most crazy way we can do it? And it's just it's so much fun to me. And I wish that more people could be creative and do that. And I think
It
that
is
we just
hard
don't.
because it comes back to, like, the starving artist thing, like, how do you make money doing that? How you make money
Yeah.
learning, right? I I totally get the struggle, because a lot of the times cooking doesn't pay very well,
Mm.
but you can be super passionate about it, and so that's why, like, not to do a plug, it is kinda weird to do a plug, but, like, with my cookbook sales, I'm doing 10% of all sales go into the
Yay.
scholarship fund to, like, help people pay for culinary school or for art school,
Yeah, that's
you know?
amazing.
And it's just something that I had to pay $50,000 for culinary school to, like, learn how to cook, and then my first job was $11 an hour. How are
Yeah.
you gonna pay 50 grand worth of school on $11 an hour, right?
Yeah.
So, it's like I wouldn't trade culinary school for anything because I learned so much, but at the same time, it's like how do you constantly learn when you're always worried about money,
Paying it off, money,
right?
yeah.
And so that's where I find the struggle to be a lot of the time with the restaurant industry. It's expensive or
Mm.
can be expensive. Sometimes it doesn't pay well, but the trade-offs can be really, really fun.
Oh
Oh,
my goodness.
oh no.
Oh,
Oh, my
we've been
I know
talking about restaurants too much.
my
It
camera
broke
got
your
so hot.
camera. It
Li-
heated up with the intensity of the moment.
I mean, at least we can reset.
Oh my gosh. Well, maybe it's a sign from the world that we need to stop our proselytizing and wrap it up.
Oh, I know. It was so good. I actually still wanted to go over this menu thing, but maybe we can save that for an anime episode.
I know. Okay, so people who are listening or watching, get this. We speaking of the creativity of the food industry and how difficult it is to come up with menus and how much it requires you to really like think through it. Our producer Joe, I guess he's a producer. Oh, you're back. Yay.
Hi.
Our producer Joe went on to ChatGPT and he came
Yep.
up with anime inspired like three-course menus for us to go over and see how they're doing. Should
Yep.
we you want to take a look at one and
We
maybe
can.
we
We
can
He has quite a few.
he has
So
got
that's
quite a few.
yes, that is
Let's take a
actually
look at one and you can tell me based on your experience of like creating menus professionally, like how does this menu sort of stack up? Let's
sure.
look at the first one. So Joe went in and he wrote this prompt. Create for me a three-course anime inspired meal. Please create a cohesive theme between the food and the anime. I don't need the recipe, but I want the dishes to have a strong thematic link to the characters, locations, or other elements of the show. And then he started out with it looks like Spirited Away.
Yep.
So, let's look at the first course,
So
Yubaba's
let me see.
wonton
Yep, pulling
soup.
this up.
Are you on? Yeah, are you on
Yeah,
the doc?
Yubaba's wonton. Do you want me to read the soup?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this
go
is
for it.
so wonton soup for those of you who are not familiar. And I've only had it a couple of times, but it's typically like vegetable heavy, a lot of vegetable
Yeah.
broth in it, right?
Clear kind of a clear broth, right?
Clear broth, right? Like a few things like that. But then it obviously has like wontons in there that could be fried or steamed or
Mhm.
boiled, I should say,
Mhm.
which is delicious. There's a place called oh my god, what is it? Oh my god, what is it called? It's a chain that I love, and I can't remember the freaking name of it now. Anyways, they have a
Mm.
really good wonton soup. So this one is inspired by Spirited Away. The dish is inspired by Yubaba, the witch who runs the bathhouse where the main character Chihiro ends up working. Wonton soup is a traditional Chinese dish, and Yubaba's character is heavily influenced by traditional Japanese and Chinese mythology. The dish could feature wontons filled with vegetables and or pork in a clear broth served with green onions and bok choy. So what's interesting about one of the struggles about working in the restaurant field is really being creative, right? Is
Yeah.
sometimes coming up with ideas.
Mm.
This allows you to prompt stuff. So we again, the prompt was create anime inspired meals, inspired by in this case Spirited Away.
Yeah.
And so this says, "Oh, that's a great idea. Maybe I could do the wonton soup, but maybe instead of a vegetable broth, maybe we do like
Mm.
a chicken broth, really aromatic.
Mm.
Maybe we throw some different spices, whatever." So this is very, very doable, right? Like seeing
Very
something like
I was
this.
gonna say this sounds boring to me, like,
It
they
right, and it's
explained
very
it.
base. It's
Like, this
very
is what I would
base.
This is what I would put on the menu, like, Yubaba is a witch with Japanese and Chinese mythological origins. So to connote that, I'm giving you wonton soup. Like, it
Right.
just doesn't it's not like giving me a story through the ingredients, but what
Oh
I
yeah.
would do instead is I would be like, because she runs the bathhouse, we're gonna give you a little bathhouse hot pot situation, and we're gonna take
Okay.
inspiration from the different, like, yokai, the different spirits that you see in the bath. Like, there's the little chickens that are in the bath that are, like, they're really cute little characters. Well, we're gonna put a little chicken broth in there, and we're gonna put, like, little they always have, like, wooden barrels that they put in there that they, like, float stuff in. We're
Oh,
gonna
right,
put,
right,
like
right.
we're
Yeah,
gonna
to
put,
like
like,
send stuff out. Yeah.
wontons, and they're gonna be floating little packages of, like, bathy goodness to you of, like, chicken and spring onion and all kinds of stuff. Like, I would just paint the story a little bit more
A little bit
and
more. I
try to,
agree.
like try to flesh it out because the way that they've described it is really
Is
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 really
kind of
boring in my
bland.
opinion.
And that is
Yeah.
one thing that I found with AI since I've been kind of messing with it is that
Mm.
it can be very shallow
Mm.
in a lot of instructional stuff, but then you can do things like just give it prompts to, "Hey, write me some code for a website that's gonna make me a ton of money," right?
Yeah.
Whatever the case is. But in this case, like, if we continue reading the menu, I'm actually kind of curious to see what it says. So,
Well, okay, wait, I just had
like
one more crazy
yeah,
idea.
yeah, yeah.
If we're gonna serve soup in this first course, why don't we serve soup that's like it's like a build your own bath. You know how you can make a bath at home and you put like bath salts in and you put like this
Gotcha.
or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like here's the soup, like now like put in your own build your own specialty bath and like we have all the ingredients and you can kind of like create your own perfect like bath soup, which is kind of weird to be thinking about drinking bath
No,
water, but like, you know?
I could totally get behind that because doesn't that remind you of, oh my god, what's the dish? It's is it not shabu shabu? It's like hot pot,
Yeah,
right?
nabe. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like what you
no,
do for
it's like
nabe.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like just having, and so you could maybe go that route, like build
Yeah.
your own soup station.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that would be fantastic.
That would be
And
so
see,
fun.
but see, like, okay, would we
And
have
you could
had that
have a
idea
little
without this prompt?
you could have little no, maybe not. So this is, like, I think a good starting point, but, like, you could
Yeah,
have little packets of spices, you could have little packets of sauce
absolutely.
and, like, like, make your own it's like people love going to Lush just to make the baths at home, right? Like,
Yep,
I'm gonna put in a bath bomb and this and this and this, and, like, you could do some really cool stuff with, like, a soup, as,
I
like, a
agree.
bath bomb soup
I
kinda
agree, and
situation.
I think that that's really the conversation, right? Like, what if we didn't have that prompt? Would we have
Yeah.
thought of doing a bathhouse soup, right?
Maybe
So
not. Yeah.
that's where I see it being super valuable,
Be helpful. Well, let's
you
look at
know?
the second course. Let's look at the second
Okay, okay.
course.
Do you wanna do second course?
Yeah, yeah. So, second course, Haku's Dragon Roll. Ooh.
Yeah,
Haku is a
that's
dragon.
a very sus title.
Yeah. Haku is a dragon who transforms into a human and becomes friends with Chihiro. A dragon roll is a popular sushi roll that features tempura shrimp and avocado wrapped in nori and rice, topped with thinly sliced avocado and unagi sauce. The green and white colors of the dish could represent Haku's dragon form, while the shrimp represents the human form. Okay, it's trying to
It's
give us
trying.
a little bit of like a
It
a
is.
story.
It is trying, and that's kind of my thing. It's like, it's not the best,
Yeah.
right? But it also gives you an idea of what you can do. Like,
Mhm.
a dragon roll is actually probably appropriate enough, you
Mm.
know? You can maybe do your own spices, your own fillings or whatever, but really
Yeah.
when you buy a dragon roll, you're expecting a certain type of
A
thing.
certain kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah,
And the
and so
branding is on point, like, it's a dragon roll,
I
he's a
agree.
dragon.
I
I
think
would
that I think that this one is a lot
better.
better of a pick than, the wonton soup.
I would if I would anime cafe-atize this roll, like, I would put a face on it, and I would put, like, little dragon horns on it, and I would just, like, little rice wafery things, I just stick them in for decoration, and
Yep,
I would change the colors because I think he's blue and white, so I might do,
he
like, a
is, yes.
yeah, I might, like I don't know how I would do blue on top, but that might be kinda, like, sus a little
Yeah,
bit, but,
the
like
only way to do blue on top is if you just use artificial coloring or you use, like, the blue what is it? The PT
oh, you could
or
do
whatever it
a
is?
pea flower extract,
Pea
yeah,
flower extract, right, and which
yeah,
is it's fine, it has its own flavor, so if you're not using those flavors, then it can become weird.
yeah,
So that's a whole thing, but also, I still think that's a pretty valuable take.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's good. Okay,
yeah.
so I would say they're 1 and 1, right?
1 and
But
1.
there's only one more on here. So
Okay,
let's do
let's
the
see.
last one and see what this is. So this one is third course. No Faces Gold Nugget Cake.
Hmm.
Interesting. Okay. I almost read that as golden chicken nuggets.
Yeah, I
Um,
know. I
No
know.
Face
It's
is
like,
a
"Oh."
mysterious spirit who begins to follow Chihiro around the bathhouse. He's known for consuming vast amounts of food, and his body expands to accommodate it. A cake made with golden nuggets, what does that mean? Would
Yeah.
represent the gold to offer to the bathhouse workers in exchange for their attention and affection. The cake could feature a rich, chocolatey base with crunchy pieces of gold covered candy mixed in, topped with gold dusted frosting. This is very
Mm.
strange.
So,
As a
do they
cake
mean
artist, thoughts?
by yeah, that's weird. Wait, let me read the description again. I have a couple thoughts on this. Gold nuggets would represent the gold he offers. It's a cake made with gold nuggets. So, are there gold nuggets in are you
I
putting
don't know
gold in
what
the
gold
cake?
nuggets
Which
means.
okay, so interestingly, I would do a king's cake take on this. King's cake is a
Okay.
famous cake
Yep.
in New Orleans for anyone who doesn't know, New Orleans. And you hide like a little trinket in the cake. Usually it's a coin or like a little baby or something to represent the birth of Jesus, and then whoever gets the slice with that trinket in it becomes the king and gets like a little prize or
Mhm.
whatever. So I might do something like that and put like a little coin or something in the cake. You could do
Okay.
that. But if they literally mean gold nuggets, what they could be referring to is honeycomb candy that you have you ever had
Interesting. I
honeycomb
have one of my favorite things.
yeah, and where if you've never seen it before for anyone out there, you basically make, like, a sugar syrup and then add
Mhm.
baking soda to it, and
Yep.
it, like, woof, explodes.
Yep.
You pour it out, you let it harden, and then when you crack it into pieces, it's just like this big puffy chunk of candy, and it's really yummy, and you could dust it with gold, like luster, to make it look
Mhm.
like gold. So, I might choose that as a decoration. I don't know if I would make it. I don't know if
'Cause
I'd put
if
it
you
in the
mixed it,
cake.
don't you think it would essentially evaporate, right? Because it
Yeah, because it's
doesn't
just
it?
sugar.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
sugar,
it's
so
just
it kinda
sugar.
just mixed into the it would just like,
S
basically fall apart inside the
so
mixture?
yeah, I would put and I wouldn't even put it in the frosting necessarily because I think it would get gummy on the outside.
Okay.
I would put it as a decoration on top of the cake more
Yep.
than anything. And then it says the cake could feature a rich chocolatey base with crunchy pieces of golden colored candy mixed in, topped
Mhm.
with gold dusted frosting. I would just make a chocolate cake with
Yeah.
maybe like a little trinket hidden in the cake layer somewhere that could be like a money thing. And then I would decorate it with like gold nuggets on top.
See,
Yeah.
that
But
sounds
like
that sounds way more pretty than what I thought. Like, so when I saw the gold nuggets, I thought of making monkey bread. If have you ever had monkey bread?
Oh,
So,
I
like
love monkey
right,
bread.
so, like, kinda maybe go that take where it's like you're
Yeah.
taking gold nuggets off of the like, the rock or whatever it would be.
Yeah, yeah,
So maybe you
yeah.
had something kinda, like, chocolatey
I
in
could
the
see that.
center, and it looked like a rock
Yeah.
or whatever, and then you had the monkey bread around
Yum.
it. Like, that was my first thought. And then maybe
Yum.
you could do something on the inside of each one or whatever it is, but
Yeah, I'd
that
like a
that
little
was
something instead.
that was so what is interesting again is I don't think I would have come up with those ideas on my own, maybe with enough research,
Yeah,
but this took all of a few minutes,
I
right?
know.
According to Joe.
I
That's what's scary.
the more I play with ChatGPT, the more I love it. Like, I was
Mhm.
doing research for a book last night, and I was, like, on Google, like, "Tell me about the eating habits of, Spanish nobles in the 1750s,"
Yep.
and Google was just giving me, like, a lot of nothing, and so I was like, "Okay, let me just try this in ChatGPT," and it was better in the sense that it gave me an answer immediately. It wasn't a
Right.
very thorough answer, but it was, like, a starting point, and then I could, like, keep asking and refining until I got some, like, really actual, like, meaningful, helpful stuff, and I was like, "Oh my god, it's ChatGPT is like having a conversation with the smartest person in the world, and they
Yeah.
always have an answer for you, and it
I
is so
wouldn't
much
say I wouldn't say the
easier."
smartest person in the world. I would say a very intelligent person who's highly confident.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what I kind of coined them as,
and
right?
their
Is like
answer. Yeah,
yeah, and that is what is interesting though, because I've definitely used them for like if I'm stuck and I'm not sure what to do, I'll
yeah.
prompt it and say, "Hey, I'm working on like I think I was working on a Korean barbecue chicken recipe." And
Mm,
you can find blogs and all of that stuff on it, but I wanted a Spanish influence. So
yeah.
I'm like, "Hey, what would you use?" And my first thought is like, I want to do Korean style barbecue chicken where it's like double fried and the batter's light and crispy. Maybe you're using some gochujang, but I also wanted to like make some kind of a mole and dip the like chicken wings in the mole. And it was just going back and forth. And I was like, what ingredients? And this was a big thing. It's like, what Korean ingredients and Spanish ingredients have overlap? Right.
Yeah,
Like, and it gave me a list of ingredients. I was like, oh my God,
yeah,
this,
like,
then
perfect.
I had to put that together. And
Mm,
because I have books on books of, flavor profiles and whatever else, but
mm.
those are limited. Those are older. Those are 15, 20 years old, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So now I can just say, "Hey, what ingredients, you know, in northern Italy have overlap with southern France?"
Mm,
And it would be like,
yeah.
Here's a list of stuff, you know? Okay, which of those can be used in pasta? Here
Mm.
you go. And it's like I literally yeah,
So
it's
fast.
super powerful.
Oh.
So that is interesting. And like the anime stuff is very interesting because it's a very big pull. Like,
Mhm.
where are they getting these ideas from?
Mhm.
That's the stuff that I find fascinating. He gave us a bunch
Yeah.
more. We'll have to revisit this because
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is gonna be good.
I
We're gonna have
know.
a menu. We should have a menu contest, right?
Oh, that would be so
Of like
fun!
of like people like in the community who want to throw menu ideas out there, and maybe we can compare it to
That
like
would be so
an AI and see what
fun.
happens. I think that'd be
Yeah, I
great.
love it.
Cool. What
Well,
else you got?
next time for sure. You guys, if you're still watching us at this point, thanks for being with us. We've had a lot of fun here. We have a lot lined up in the future. We have the results of Matcha Madness to go over.
Yep.
We need to look at the rest of these AI menus. We need to look at the TikTok videos and do some reactions for you. So we've got a lot coming up. Make sure to tune in. We are gonna, right, Paul, we're gonna start trying to post the first and third week of every month.
Of every month. Yes.
Yeah, after
Yeah.
this one is gonna go live, and then we're gonna have a couple weeks off, and then we're really gonna get into it in April, May?
Yep.
May. May mostly is when we're really gonna get into it, so we've got a lot to talk about and tell you about, and we're really excited for it,
Yeah.
so stay
Also, and
tuned.
if anything else, after you guys see this, I'll see you at SoccerCon.
Yeah, oh my gosh, how
Yeah, it's gonna be
exciting.
fun. All right,
Alright,
guys.
see you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.